Hi guys, and welcome to this month's Percussion Revolver class. This month we're going to be talking about personal defense guns. This one is the Uberti 62 Pocket Navy in 36 caliber. And we'll be talking about why these small guns were so popular and why they held on a lot longer after the percussion era than really a lot of the other belt guns. So first off, let's see, can I hit a plate with it at standard combat range? There is one of the ball after it's hit that steel plate. You look close, you can still see the rammer mark from the head that made that round circle. There's the back side of it. That was that round ball hitting that plate and pancaking out perfectly from it. So this does work as a self-defense gun from the day intended. That day we got far more modern. But it's actually a fact that it's very hard to find these guns in percussion. So many of them were converted after the war, after the percussion era, over to cartridge firearms of 38 rim fires and things like that, because they were still such good personal defense weapons. They just changed the ammunition, and Colt did quite a good business on modifying these guns from percussion over, because they were kind of like the first choice for a lot of guys, because they were available, reliable, and they did a really good job. Now, modern cap jamming is a problem because of our caps. And you saw me have a cap jam with this. That could ruin your day in a serious moment. But it just depended a lot on the gun, and it depended a lot on the caps and the load, and just your luck was a big part of it. So now let's take a look at what kind of accuracy we can get out of this. Alright, let me restart so you can hear me. Hopefully that reset the microphone. A lot of times when you shoot next to the camera, the sound goes out because of the bang, and it resets the microphone. So you got to turn it off and turn it back on. Hopefully that did it. So sitting here at 7 yards, combat distance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a fly. So that's easily, in a group about that big, like 2 inch or less. This was meant for close range personal protection. It seems to do pretty good at that range, doesn't it? Now, once you start opening the range up, the group's going to get bigger because of this tiny side. But where was I aiming? I was aiming right here. So it's that much high. Which would mean, and I figured out, aim for about the bottom of the sternum. And it's going to put them all into the chest cavity. So aim where the belly joins the rib cage, and all of it's going to be up here in the important part. That's what they did that day, and all of it's going to be smaller than your hand. That's what we wanted. Okay, now that we've seen that, now let's talk about a way that you can make a modification to improve the mainspring, because a lot of these small ones, the 49 pocket model and the 62 Pocket Police and the 62 Pocket Navy share the same frame and action and everything, and they are known for having weak mainsprings. Actually, the mainspring's bent a little wrong. Instead of being like that, it's like that, and that changes the geometry. So let's talk just a second about what to do to maybe improve that just a little bit. Okay, I've taken my screwdriver and I've taken the 3 screws out to remove my grip. Now what you're seeing here, the geometry of it is, you see there's a block right there that screws it, that spring attaches to, and then there's a gap right there. And you see where it's actually up here on the rope. If you will take and unscrew this screw and take you a thin washer of something. In the past we've done it with thin leather, but it could also be done with like a piece of a soda can, and put a shim between those two. You actually move the spring further back and change the geometry a little bit. You can actually lighten up the trigger pull just a bit, or lighten up the cocking action. Now, with it being a little weak, where it's not lifting up and it's not quite strong enough, you can also, right in this gap right here, you can put, I've tried putting square toothpicks in there, that's improvement, and then also eventually putting metal shims right in here. Don't go beyond much past that 1/4 inch right there. But what that does is it stiffens up the spring a little and makes it a little more power to it. So upon cocking, see, whenever you cock it, see on the pocket model, see how far that spring has to bow down. You see it's lost so much. Well, you see the size of gap that is right there. If I put something there that goes from like right there back, forces that spring to put more tension here, that will lift up a little bit harder. Now the way that Mark Hubbs of Era's Gone did his was he put, excuse the wind guys, we got the storm front moving in. He went and put 2 springs, one on top of the other, to get it to be reliable. If the mainspring is not strong enough, then you get a lot of blowback in here, as you saw me earlier. And that's what happens. This will actually foul up underneath the hammer right there on any of the Colt models. It could be the 1860 Army, 51 Navy, 61, any of the Dragoons even. Any of the above can and will foul out because it'll become so much cake fouling right there, where it is blowing out of the nipple straight back through that little notch straight down into this chamber back here between the hammer and the frame, and that allows that to build up, and then it gets where you pull the trigger and it's like it's landing on a feather bed. It'll go thut, and it ain't got no power to go bang because it's landing on that. You see what I did there is I just took my gun butter and put on there, and it just melts all this fouling off. You just wipe it off instead of having to scrub it. Once in a blue moon you are going to have a little tight space, but I like it to be able to get the crud out of there, especially with a small one like this, because it is a little more delicate and therefore is more likely to get jammed up with fouling than the big guns, which have more real estate, so to speak, to play with. And I'm going to just take a tip like that and double it in half. Forgot to bring Q-tips. Clean out that channel just a little bit to keep it from fouling out on me. There. That's all it takes. But back to, if this is not strong enough, upon firing, what's going to happen is the pressures within the chamber are going to cause this right here. You're going to see like the cylinder is going to recoil back, and then the hammer is going to radius back just a grunt. What you're going to see is it's going to fire, and back pressure trying to come out that nipple is going to lift that hammer up if you don't have enough spring tension. When it does just that much, that gas blows and goes down between the two actions. And that's going to cause soft hammer landings, which is going to lead to erratic ignition. It'll also cause cap jams because then the pieces of cap can blow down there. This gun, as you remember when I first got it, I had to change out the nipples because the nipples that were in it had such big orifices that so much back pressure was blowing back. It just, every round, it blew hunks of cap all the way down into the, I don't mean under the hammer, I mean all the way back down into the trigger section where you had to dismantle the gun to get the fragments and shrapnel out from down there because it was just blowing it down. I have since stiffened my spring up a little bit to make it where it doesn't do it as much, and I changed out nipples so that have a smaller orifice. That way it worked better and it's more consistent in its shooting. These little guns can be very reliable and a great little plinker. They're not as accurate as the bigger guns because they don't have as long a sight radius. And when you look at, wipe this one off right quick, I've just shot 8 cylinders through it. Sorry guys, I got to shooting them plates and was having fun. So the trying a bit of board butter in there, and it'll clean out all of them gook. Now what's that? 8 times 5, 40. So I fired 40 rounds on it in about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that. Adds up in a hurry. But back to sight radius. When you put the sight onto the gun and you come back to full cock, your sight radius from here, make sure it's focusing, your sight radius from here to here, this length. But if you'll also notice, this is a tapered barrel, and that means the barrel is dropping down. So when you're at full cock, you are barely seeing just the tip of that front sight poking over the top of the back of the barrel. So you cannot drop it down like I can in 1860. I cannot deepen my notch. But so far, when I tip it down, I see the back of the barrel, I don't see the front sight anymore. Now on an 1860, a 51, or a 61, there is enough real estate there that I can deepen it down to get it shooting more point of aim. But the closest I've been able to get this down is about 10 inches above point of aim, which is perfectly fine for a self-defense gun. Because a self-defense gun, you're going to be aiming, like I showed, not at the exact point, but aiming basically his belly button. That's where you're going to be aiming to get it, put it in where you want it. Now let me get this put back together and we'll finish up. Oh, always on when you're reassembling, start both of your top of your trigger screws, your trigger guard screws first, back strap grips first, make sure they're started, and flip it over and line up your grip hole in the heel. Start it, just get it started. And that can be a little bit fiddly at times. Once it's started, now go and tighten these up. Pull them down snug. Like that. Then tighten this up. There's a little bit of a spring tension between the trigger guard and the back strap. You can see the gap right there. When we tighten this up, it'll pull that tight. So disassembly, see, now it's gone. Disassembly always starts with that screw. We're back in operation. Okay, now that we have looked at, yes, you can use this at combat ranges, and yes, we've talked about, how to boost up that mainspring. That's usually the weakness. Change out those nipples because the ones that come from the factory are usually way too big an orifice and lets way too much pressure back. And drop down some of the jamming issues that we have. This becomes a fairly reliable, fun little gun. Now, is it still a good choice for personal defense? Modern times, no. In our modern world, I would not count on this as strictly my self-defense gun. Having said that, though, it is still pretty potent up close, as you saw the groupings I got out of it, and it does put a 36 caliber hole and is more than enough to penetrate and do the job it was designed to do. Now, at the time these were prevalent, the favorite way Sorry, I had to adjust. Okay, at the time that these were prevalent, you got to remember, we didn't have penicillin. We didn't have antibiotics. And a lot of times they would use bear's grease, old bacon lard, stuff like that. And that would be the coating on the bullet, and they'd smear across here and they'd do the barrel like I do. And that wouldn't get changed. Now imagine you've been toting that in your coat pocket because ammunition is expensive and you don't waste it. Only professionals that were gunfighters, law enforcement and stuff like that would waste ammunition going out and just plinking with it. They learned to shoot and then that was it. They rarely shot again unless it was necessary because the ammunition cost money and you couldn't just fabricate it, you know. So the idea of the thing we see in the movies of the old sheriff sitting out there and target practicing all day, that was not common at all. In fact, FOR.HOPE used to do a thing where he would go out and test fire a gun before he thought he was going to be getting into a bad situation, and he did it publicly so that the bad guys knew about how accurate he was. Wild Bill Hickok, when he was a marshal, he would come out to go down to the restaurant where he ate for free, and he would throw a can out in the middle of the street and pull one of his Colts and target shoot it all the way down and make it roll all the way down there. While he was eating his dinner, after he got done eating his dinner, he would clean and reload that gun and then take the other gun coming up the street and shooting all the way back to the martial law. This was for demonstration and a reputation and etc. But the average guy wouldn't waste ammo. And so these guns were loaded with grease, lard, fat, whatever they could do to try to keep rust to a minimum. And that went rancid. That's a biological. Now when I shoot you with this, even though that ball didn't pack as much punch as we would think today was necessary, and I just hit you in the arm, a week from now you're going to die horribly of infection, and there ain't a thing that can be done to stop it. Because of even if they dig the ball out of you, the lard and stuff, the biological that it tracked into the wound, whether or not you can survive, that's the question. And there were a lot of people that got killed from a scratch in those days, where just, you know, a woman clawing a guy's face I know of in California because they got in an argument and she scratched his face and he died 10 days later of infection because of whatever she had on her fingernails was enough. Once it got in his system, there was no antibiotics. And so death by that was pretty big thing. And so a little bitty gun like this that packed that, it had as much biological weapon fear as it did actual terminal ballistics. And so people were afraid of getting shot for that very reason. That's one of the reasons in the military they just took the arm off or leg off. It was in the torso, they put you over there and let you die because they knew you were going to die. So it was a big thing in those days. Okay. Now for our modern, we don't have that. Today we got penicillin. But would this be effective? Yes. Have I used this on small game? I have, rabbits and stuff. I have not shot anything big with it yet. But opportunity may present itself one day to shoot a big hog or something like that with it at close range and have a bigger gun for a backup. We shall see. These guns held on so long after the percussion era because they were converted readily over to cartridge firing. The cylinders would be cut out and a rimfire tooth be added to the hammer and a two-piece shield put back here, and suddenly you had a rimfire 38. Again, people didn't target shoot. And so I would get this and put a box of ammo with it, and that might last me 5 years because I would only shoot when I had to. And so therefore these guns soldiered on well up into the beginning of the 20th century. And a lot of these you find today on the collector market have been converted. It's kind of actually a little more rare to find original percussion because they were so easily converted. So they stayed as self-defense guns well up into the beginning of the 1900s because they were so viable of that. So if you're looking to get one, there are many things to point to it to make it an advantage. One, smaller chamber capacity means that I can get a lot of shots per pound out of this. My typical load in this is somewhere around 20 grains. If I'm loading a paper cartridge with a conical, I drop that down to 15 grains in a conical, and that fills it up and makes a nice loud bump and does fairly decent accuracy. Now the accuracy you saw on the paper target and shooting the plates was round ball with 20 grains. So I can shoot, you know, all 5 charges for 100 grains of powder. Pretty good, and that's a lot cheaper than shooting a bigger belt gun, which is going to use 30 grains, and so you're 150 grains for a 44, shooting a 30 grain charge, and I'm 50 grains less just pulling the trigger on this. So for a target gun, playing gun, enjoying gun, perfectly viable. Caps are the same, balls the same, nothing oddball, so therefore these are very viable as a cost-efficient way to shoot percussion guns. And plus the history of it. They're short, they're light, they're handy, and a lot of people that's got smaller hands, these tiny grips like the ladies fit better. Especially if you're going to start to teach a younger person to shoot a percussion revolver. This is the perfect size for a, you know, like a 10 or 12-year-old to start out with, practicing shooting before you upgrade into the full-size belt gun, which might be a little bit heavier for their hand. So this is the way to go. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I enjoy doing the series. Please add any comments or questions down there, and I'll be happy to answer them as best I can. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.